As we get to the end of the semester, a lot of students have been asking me what is required if you want to do the final project as a PowerPoint. So I'm going to do a little video here showing you a sample project. This is actually one of my part of my master's thesis that I did last year during the middle of the COVID pandemic, and I'm going to show you what that presentation would look like. But first I want to show you what the rubrics should look like. So let's start with the rubrics and then we'll go from there. Alright, so let's take a look at the rubrics. The first of the criteria is content, which in order to get full credit, all required sections, including the title, the introduction, the information slides, the summary, and the references, are included accurately and logically. Between 15 and 20 information slides have been included in the project. So to get 100% of that particular category, the content must be fully accurate, the information must be presented in a logical order, making it easy to understand and academically professional, and of course all the sections must be there. For the 85% level, the content is somewhat accurate, but some required information is missing. So this would mean that you probably missed out on one of the sections, but included most everything I'm looking for. For the C level, the 75% credit for that particular criteria, the content is fairly accurate, but some required information is missing, or it lacks logical cohesion. So if it doesn't make much sense, or it's not logical in terms of your arguments, we may have a problem here. But the presentation is still somewhat easy to follow, so you're using communication skills. For your D level, which would be a 65% of that particular category, which is 20% of weight, so that'd be like 13 points. The content contains inaccuracies, the information lacks organization, and it is more difficult to follow, but you still included most everything I'm looking for, or at least some of it. And then on the last one, it's no evidence or insufficient evidence presented, so it's just not there. For the next criteria, it's the bullets and the notes. All slides except the front title, references, and end title pages have between 3 and 5 bullets that concisely present necessary text in an easy-to-read manner without being distracting or confusing. You need slide notes. Slide notes were used to extend bullets with extended text to provide narration. You're not around to narrate, so you're going to have to narrate by way of your slide notes, and I'll show you what that looks like. Planning and research. The project demonstrated understanding of the problem development and research with use of an academic language and proper support for arguments. Used in-text citations were appropriate. So you need to use your citations. And again, I'll show you what that looks like. The content was highly developed, contained a problem and research methods sections that were highly developed. Always uses academic language and resources to make well-grouped clusters of above-average resource analysis so that you can validate your underlying arguments. In other words, you support yourself by proving it. The next level would be the B level. That's 85% of that credit, which would be around 17 points. Above average effort is that would be more like 8.5 points because this is a 10% weight. Above average effort is demonstrated highly developed research methods, complete literature review with above average detail, logically grouped research sources into clustered groups. As a student made arguments using research sources in order to develop the arguments for this, and policy needs. At least 7 cited resources are included. To get the 100%, you're going to need at least 10 to 15. Then for the 75% level, which would be 7.5 points, moderate or average effort is demonstrated. Student included research question, moderately developed discussion of research methods, and substantiated research thesis with a well-developed and complete literature review, sometimes grouped literature into clusters in order to discuss and evaluate academic literature. You have at least 5 resources here in the literature review. For the D level, 65%, which would be 6.5 points. Some effort demonstrated, student included research question, brief description of methods, some attempt to substantiate research thesis, incomplete literature review, less than 5 sources were included, but at least you had some. On the last one, no evidence or insufficient effort demonstrated, incomplete problem development, little if any discussion of research methods, little evidence of the literature review, meaning you didn't give me your cited sources or go back and show me your research. Less than 5 sources included in the literature review altogether. All right, so going down to the next one, this is 20% of the total weight. Connections, made appropriate connections between research question and thesis, research methods, literature review, and discussion of implications or policy recommendations. You have all of those sections. You're making your point. You're developing your point. You're showing me that you've done some research, and you've got a recommendation that's based in some semblance of fact. For the 100%, which would be the 20 points, I believe. You're looking here at superior effort and product. Paper shows evidence of well-developed synthesis in connecting the research question or thesis, research methods, literature review, and discussion of implications and policy recommendations, evidence of scholarly arguments using components of the paper to connect and make a logical and creative argument for recommended policy. You show signs of a high level of scholarly skill and professionalism. I'm looking for academic professionalism and skill. On the B level, about average effort demonstrated. Paper shows average to above average evidence of synthesis in connecting the research questions or thesis, research methods, literature review, and discussion of implications and policy recommendations. The average reader can understand how parts of the paper connect to make a logical and understandable argument for recommended policy. You're connecting your arguments to your policy recommendation here. For the C level, you're demonstrating some understanding of how the research question or the thesis connects to research methods, literature review, and discussion of implications or policy recommendations. Some evidence of development in arguments, literature review, implications, and policy recommendations. Then for the D level, you're showing me some effort. You're attempting to connect your research and question and thesis with your research methods, your literature review, and your policy recommendations. You have a brief but incomplete discussion of those policy recommendations. So you're leaving something to be desired, explaining why you're recommending these things. If you should be recommending something. And then the last one, basically, you don't have any evidence. No evidence of synthesis, analysis, or policy recommendations. So the next category is communication skills, presenting a well-argumented policy recommendation with appropriate academic writing style, grammar, and punctuation. This is where your writing and punctuation are going to go in grammar. You're demonstrating excellent effort in supporting your policy recommendation with research, academic writing style, so you're using academic language, academic tone. Student had no more than 2 grammatical or punctuation errors throughout the entire document, and they should be minor. If it's a writing error, a major writing error where things just aren't coming together, then we may have a problem. You demonstrate on the B level, you're demonstrating above average effort in supporting policy recommendations with your research. You're maintaining academic writing style and professional tone throughout most of the paper. You made no more than 3 grammatical or punctuation errors. For the C level, you're demonstrating moderate effort in supporting policy recommendations with arguments based on research. You're maintaining an academic writing style, you're trying to, and professional tone through much of the paper, made between 4 and 5 grammatical errors. For the D level, you showed some effort in supporting your policy recommendations with research. You attempted to take academic and professional tones in your writing. Sometimes you made some errors, made between 5 and 7 grammatical errors. And then if you made more than 7 grammatical errors, we're going to be down in that last F level. You need to use academic language, professional tone, and try to make as few errors as possible for this criteria. Then the last criteria is following APA format and compliance with academic formatting standards, providing internal citations. So I'm looking at your internal citations that correspond to your references. For 100%, you demonstrated quality in compliance with the APA format. Very little, if any, revisions required to comply with APA. Your B level would be above average effort. Some revision is required to comply with APA. Your C level, moderate effort demonstrated, followed APA format mostly, but a moderate level of revision is required. The D level, some effort demonstrated. Student sometimes follows the APA format, but considerable revision. You're trying, but you're having a hard time on that one. And then on the F level, the 25%, no evidence or insufficient effort is demonstrated. Okay, those are the rubrics. Now we'll go on to show you what a sample presentation would look like. I'm not going to go through the entire presentation, obviously. I'm going to just show you what some of the sample parts should look like. All right, so I want to show you now a PowerPoint that I think will show you how a policy project should be done. This is actually a policy paper that was done both as a report and as a PowerPoint for my master's degree. I completed my second master's degree in politics. This one was in public administration last spring, so I am a full-fledged member of the class of COVID-19. So let's take a look. First of all, you have your title slide. Now in your title slide, I have the title, Higher Education Response to COVID-19, and then I have a subtitle, a cost-benefit analysis of instructional continuity policies at the El Paso Community College, my name, my title, and where I'm at. Okay, and I would advise you to put the date here as well, but you don't have to. Then I have an abstract. Now the abstract here is very short. This paper addresses a problem of instructional continuity policy planning in response to institutional interruptions experienced in the spring, summer, and fall terms of 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic at the El Paso Community College in El Paso, Texas. That's it. You don't have to go too much further on the abstract for the PowerPoint. You do for the paper. All right. Now, your PowerPoint must have a set of objectives. The objectives are that we're going to understand the situational background and specific problems facing the El Paso Community College considering the 2020-2021 pandemic. We're going to review and discuss challenges to online teaching and instruction. We're going to frame The El Paso Community College response to COVID-19 from an active research perspective, which means I actually did some research, not just a literature review, but some active research. You do not have to conduct active research for your project, but sometimes it really, really, really helps. This one would not be able to be done without active research. The reader should be able to consider strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats, or the SWOT, for El Paso Community College. List and rank El Paso Community College policy alternatives based on costs and benefits. And lastly, we're going to present a proposed policy offering maximum benefit to the El Paso Community College administration, the faculty, the students, and the stakeholders in the community. Now, notice what I have down below. This is your notes. Now, the way you get to those notes is that you pull up, when you're in PowerPoint, you pull this up and you can write down here, and that's where your notes go. They should be in a fairly narrative perspective. So you'll see them listed as bullets here, but when you get to the notes, it's after viewing the presentation, the reader should be able to, and then I have them listed. Then I have a section title here. This is the telling me where the introduction is. If it's not easy to see, make sure you label it. So here's the problem statement. On March 20th, 2020, El Paso Community College announced, and these are the bullets. There are 4 bullets here. And then I have everything in a narrative form below. Same thing for the situational background. I've got my bullets, and then I have, here is my first citation. This is where I got the information from. These are actually 3 interviews that I conducted. And as I go down here, I have it in a narrative form that can be easily read by the presenter and by the student or the reader. And then I have the sources here. And then I have a notation. This information was based upon telephone interviews conducted. So this is a little more detailed in your notes than it is up here in your slide. Okay, so let's move on down to the next section. I have my research questions here. I've labeled them, 4 of them. Then I have my literature review. The beginning of my literature review is basically where all of the journal research goes. So I've got some research here on the mission of El Paso Community College, the vision of El Paso Community College, and El Paso Community College's 5 institutional goals. And I made sure that I cited where I got each of these from, okay? Then I have my project objectives. Research conducted for this paper will objectively consider the strategies being used for online teaching and evaluate the costs, benefits, and limitations of each potential strategy. All right, so then I do more research. As I do more research here, I've got some journal peer-reviewed articles here, and those are going to correspond to the reference section that I'm going to show you at the end. All right, so I'm going to move on down. Beyond all of these, and get to my research methods. This is where I explain my model. So in this case, I did a cost-benefit analysis, a model, and I haven't done the notes on this one yet, but there were 2 bullets. Scientific modeling technique, cost-benefit model is a scientific modeling technique that seeks to determine the cost efficiency of a set of policy choices. And it's a rules-based or heuristic model that has been developed in Excel. This is what I did. I created this Excel model. And if a researcher or reader wants to see it, I have references to the model that I can give them, and I can give them the model itself. So considerations and constraints. These are the things that needed to be considered as we develop the project and the research, and the constraints on the research. What limits your research? The policy alternatives. Okay? There were 6 policy alternatives. Number 1 was returning to a traditional face-to-face instruction in the fall of 2020 with little or no mitigation, which means we didn't do anything. And we didn't limit student population either. That wasn't going to happen. Maximizing face-to-face instruction with constraints of social distancing. So now we're limiting the size of the number of students in each class. Mitigating techniques based upon the Centers for Disease Control and the state and local government authorities. And then third option was regular face-to-face instruction with mitigation, which basically means we're going to go back to face-to-face instruction, but we're going to mitigate, supplemented by online sections to maintain enrollment. So we're going to have both online and regular face-to-face, but mostly face-to-face. That one probably wasn't going to fly, but we don't know until we look at the numbers. Then our policy alternatives. A full online instruction with no accommodation for vocational technical instructional needs. So we're going to go full online, and we're not going to accommodate for any of the needs for vocational or technical instruction. We're just not going to have them. A hybrid or blended instructional model with appropriate mitigation and social distancing for vocational and technical courses. And then last is the online-only sessions, which allow for hybrid instruction for vocational and technical courses. So, building the cost-benefit model, I explain here how the model was developed. I went to EPCC Finance. I used the EPCC database that's available to instructors to tell me course loads, passing rates and failing rates, and all kinds of other statistics that would probably nauseate you beyond belief, but they're very important here. And then I went to government databases. I went to the health department with elpasostrong.org. I went to, which gave us daily where El Paso stood in terms of the pandemic. I went to the Department of Health and Human Services at the state of Texas. And then I went to the United States Centers for Disease Control. So I looked at everything. I looked at the demographics. So there's some assumptions that we made. The demographics, based upon the previous term, full term, the student course enrollments and course offerings by section for the fall of 2020 were based on historical data. There were 29,049 students enrolled in the last full session, with 4,393 sections across all the different types of instruction. But we weren't going to be able to do that. So what I did was I went in and built a model and limited different constraints based upon how I was going to adjust for the COVID. Then I have my modeling instructions here for assignments. You have part-time and full-time instructors and non-salary resourced instructors like the library. And those are all going to change based upon student load. So the other thing I had to do was figure out what the rate of transmission was going to be, which the scientists call the R naught. And I kept it at about 2.5, which was the average at the time. Obviously now it's way below 1. We assumed a 13.7% positivity rate, meaning at least 13 to 14% of the tests that were being done came back positive. And back in the era of the pandemic, it was at least that much. It was actually up to 18 to 25% at one point. Now, of the positive cases, 5% were assumed to be going to the hospital. So that means, 95% of these positive cases would not go to a hospital. Then we have to assign a possible figure for what it would cost. Assuming a $35,000 cost for going to the hospital, depending on whether or not you were going to need intensive care, and then your lost wages for $2,500 a month at least, on average. 5% of hospitalizations would probably die from the disease, so that's 5% of 5%. And we came up with value of statistical life, which comes from the Department of the Census, which is expected to be about $3.5 million over someone's lifetime. So they actually have gone back and done research to determine how much a life is worth. So then we consider the benefits and the costs. We have to consider the variable costs, which change by student load, the fixed costs, which do not change by student load, and the projected revenues, which are based upon student load. How many sections we're offering and how many students are paying. This gives us a number, total benefits over total costs. If the benefits more exceed the costs, then you have a number greater than 1. If the benefit equal the cost, you're break even, you'll have a number of equal to 1. And if the if the costs exceed the benefits, then it's less than 1. So that's the number that we come up with that we're going to look at here in a minute. Then we rank the alternatives. So for each of the 6 alternatives, I came up with a number based upon that complicated model that was built into Excel. And here are the 6 alternatives. Regular face-to-face, no mitigation. Regular face-to-face with mitigation. Regular face-to-face with mitigation supplemented by online. Fully online, no vocational or technology sections. Hybrid instruction, meaning that you're going to have vocational and technology sessions that need a lab with face-to-face instruction for those labs, and internet for everybody, hybrid for tech and vocational classes. So the results, I have again a section here showing the results, and here are the rankings. Ranking 1 the first ranking was the alternative number 4, going fully online, no vocational or tech. Ranking number 2 was internet for all with hybrid. And that's what we went with. That's what the college went with, and that's what, although the number 1 ranking was alternative 4, look at you'll see that there's very little difference in terms of the cost-benefit analysis, but you're going to get a lot more benefits by allowing for those tech and vocational classes. And then hybrid instruction with mitigation was 0.86. That basically meant everybody was going to go hybrid, partially online, partially in class. And that didn't happen. Alternative 3 was regular face-to-face with mitigation supplemented by online. So we didn't go that route. Alternative 2, regular face-to-face with mitigation. No, we didn't go full face-to-face. And then the last one that was definitely not going to work was actually the costs exceeded the benefits, was regular face-to-face, no mitigation. This was costing the college much more than it was going to get anywhere near. So then we had our policy recommendations, and I note here that at first glance you consider only the numbers. Alternative 4 would be the best choice, but if you consider that there's only a slight difference between the 2 ranked alternatives, alternative 4 did not allow for vocational or technical classes, so alternative 6 was the one that was recommended. Okay. Then I added some additional policy recommendations that needed to be considered. Adopting a conservative approach to instructional continuity, not going too fast to come back. Looking at the community and the world at large, we're still in the grips of the pandemic, and conservative use of on-site instructional resources and more liberal use of online. So these are the conclusions and the summary and the conclusions. Basically, these are the things that just kind of reinforce or restate what was in the presentation. Now, lastly, and we're almost done, the references sections. There's 2 pages here of references. I have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Remember I told you between 10 and 15 would be good. I can tell you I used a lot more than this 16 references in my full project. They're in alphabetical order, and then when we're doing APA, we always do the hanging indent. You can look up the APA format, and there's a citation generator that is available through the library. So make sure you go to your research and writing resources to get those done. But this is what the reference section is, and it should go back and line up. You should not be using a resource in your writing part that is not listed in your reference section. And with that, that is a sample of your PowerPoint version of the policy. So I want everybody to have a good evening, good day whenever you're seeing this, and we'll talk to you later.